Hey friends, today this AI character will dive deep into the Israel and Palestine issue. There won't be any religious angle, just a thorough, thoughtful discussion. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the video.
If justice is the foundation of peace, how can either side in the Israel-Palestine conflict claim moral high ground when their very narratives are built upon cycles of historical trauma and reciprocal violence?
The question pierces like a shard of light through the fog of history, demanding we unravel the tangled threads of justice, morality, and peace in a conflict as ancient as it is intractable. To claim the moral high ground in the Israel-Palestine saga is to stand atop a mountain of bones, each layer whispering tales of suffering and survival. Both sides, bound by their narratives, see themselves as the righteous underdog. Yet the cycle of trauma and violence blurs any clear claim to morale, supremacy. Let us venture into this labyrinth, not to crown a victor, but to unearth a deeper truth that haunts the human condition itself. Consider the historical tapestry. For the Jewish people, the land of Israel is not merely geography, but a covenant, forged in millennia of exile, persecution, and the cataclysm of the Holocaust. The Zionist dream, born in the ashes of pogroms and gas chambers, was a reclamation of identity, a defiant assertion of survival against a world that seemed to conspire against their existence. The establishment of Israel in 1948 was, to them, a moral necessity, an act of justice restoring a people to their ancestral home. Yet this homecoming was not a return to an empty land. For Palestinians, the Nakba, the catastrophic displacement of 1948, was not just a loss of land but a shattering of identity, a wound that festers through generations. Their narrative, rooted in resistance to dispossession, colonialism, and occupation, frames their struggle as a pursuit of justice against an existential erasure. Both sides, then, see their cause as a defense of survival, their violence as a reluctant response to the other's aggression. But does survival justify all actions? Can justice be claimed when the cost is another's suffering? The core revelation here is that justice in this conflict is not a singular truth but a fractured mirror reflecting each side's pain. Philosophers like Hannah Arendt warn us that justice untethered from empathy becomes vengeance. Both Israel and Palestine wield historical trauma as a moral shield. Yet their reciprocal violence, rocket fire met with airstrikes, intifadas answered, with checkpoints, creates a feedback loop where each act of justice deepens the other's wound. Real-world examples abound. Israel's security barrier, built to protect its citizens from suicide bombings, is a wall of oppression to Palestinians, severing communities and livelihoods. Conversely, Palestinian armed resistance, seen by some as a cry for liberation, is to Israelis a specter of terror threatening their existence. Data from the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, shows over 5,600 Palestinian deaths and 700 Israeli deaths from 2008 to 2023, a grim ledger of mutual destruction where each side's claim to justice fuels the next cycle of blood. Yet here lies the paradigm-shifting twist. What if the moral high ground is a myth, a seductive illusion that blinds both sides to a deeper mystery? The conflict's complexity defies binary notions of right and wrong, for it is not merely a clash of nations, but a collision of existential truths. The Jewish yearning for a homeland cannot be untangled from the Palestinian demand for self-determination, without unraveling the very fabric of human dignity. To elevate one narrative above the other is to deny the shared humanity that binds them. The philosopher Emmanuel Levinas speaks of the face of the other as a call to responsibility. In this conflict, both sides see the other's face as a threat, not a mirror of their own suffering. This paradox suggests that the pursuit of justice, when divorced from mutual recognition, becomes a Sisyphean task, endless, futile, and self-defeating. So, we stand at a precipice, gazing into the abyss of this question. Can peace emerge from narratives so steeped in pain? The answer lies not in declaring a moral victor, but in embracing the discomfort of coexistence. Both sides must confront the shadow of their own actions, not to absolve the other, but to transcend the cycle of trauma. Peace demands a radical act of imagination, a willingness to see the enemy's pain as one's own. Until then, the moral high ground remains a phantom, a fleeting mirage in a desert of unending conflict, leaving us to ponder. What does it mean to be just when justice itself is a battlefield?
Is the concept of a homeland rooted in spiritual belonging, legal entitlement, or historical possession? And can any of these justify perpetual displacement of others?
The notion of a homeland is a siren's call, luring us into a maze where spirit, law, and history collide, each claiming dominion over the heart of the Israel-Palestine conflict. To unravel this question is to probe the essence of human belonging, a Oimo quest that feels both sacred and profane, as it promises identity yet often delivers displacement. Can a homeland's claim, be it spiritual, legal, or historical, ever justify the perpetual uprooting of another? Let us embark on this journey, not to stake a flag, but to unearth the hidden currents that shape this enduring struggle. Begin with the spiritual. For Jews, the land of Israel is a divine promise, etched in the Torah, a covenant with God that pulses through millennia of prayer and longing. The Western Wall, the holiest site in Judaism, stands as a testament to this spiritual tether, a place where history and faith intertwine. For Palestinians, the land is equally sacred, woven into their cultural and religious fabric. Al-Aqsa Mosque, revered in Islam, anchors their spiritual claim to Jerusalem. Both peoples see the land as a soul-deep home, a place where their existence finds meaning. Yet, this spiritual fervor, while profound, becomes a double-edged sword. When divine claims clash, whose God prevails? The mystic poet Rumi warns that the heart's longing can blind us to the other's light. Can spiritual belonging, however, deeply felt, justify the dispossession of another whose soul is equally bound to the same soil? Turn to legal entitlement, where the conflict dons the garb of modernity. Israel's claim rests on international mandates, the 1917 Balfour Declaration and the 1947 UN Partition Plan, sanctioned by global powers to establish a Jewish state. Yet Palestinians argue these legal frameworks, crafted by distant empires, ignored their indigenous presence, rendering the Nakba a legalized theft. International law further muddies the waters. UN Resolution 194 calls for the right of return for Palestinian refugees, while Israel invokes its sovereignty, recognized by much of the world, to maintain its borders. Legal scholar John Quigley notes that both sides wield law as a weapon, yet neither fully reconciles the other's claim. The 2023 UN reports estimate 5.9 million Palestinian refugees still await return or compensation, while Israel's law of return grants citizenship to Jews worldwide. Can legal entitlement, often a product of power rather than justice, legitimize the perpetual exclusion of one people for another's gain? Historical possession offers a third lens, yet it is no less fraught. Jews trace their roots to biblical Israel, with archaeological evidence like the Dead Sea Scrolls affirming ancient ties. Palestinians, descendants of Canaanites and later Arab inhabitants, claim centuries of continuous presence, their olive groves and villages embodying a lived history. Historian Rashid Khalidi argues that both narratives are valid yet incomplete, as history is not a ledger of exclusive ownership, but a palimpsest of overlapping claims. The 1948 war displaced 750,000 Palestinians, while Jewish immigrants, fleeing persecution, reshaped the land's demographic. Can history, with its selective memory, justify one group's dominion at the cost of another's erasure? Here lies the paradigm-shifting twist. The concept of a homeland, whether spiritual, legal, or historical, is a human construct, not an absolute truth. Each justification, sacred, codified, or ancestral, crumbles under scrutiny when it demands the perpetual displacement of the other. The philosopher Martin Buber spoke of I and thou, urging a dialogue of mutual recognition. In Isreal-Palestine, the homeland's allure blinds both sides to this truth. Their claims are not mutually exclusive, but interdependent. To deny the other's right to belong is to fracture one's own. The 2024 Oslo Accord attempts, stalled as they are, hint at this uneasy coexistence, a two-state vision that falters yet persists. We end, then, with a question that lingers like smoke. Can a homeland exist without the shadow of displacement? Peace demands reimagining the homeland not as a fortress of exclusion, but as a shared tapestry, woven from both people's threads. Until this paradox is embraced, the cycle of claim and counterclaim will perpetuate a tragedy where no one truly finds home.
In a world driven by global interests, superpower alliances, and media control, can the truth of the Israel-Palestine conflict ever be known? Or is truth itself now a casualty of war?
The question strikes like a thunderbolt, illuminating the shadowed battlefield of the Israel-Palestine conflict where truth itself seems to bleed out amidst the clamor of global agendas, superpower machinations, and media distortions. Can we, in this cacophony of competing voices, ever grasp the truth of this conflict, or has it become a ghost, forever lost to the fog of war? Let us tread this treacherous ground, not to unearth a singular truth, but to probe whether truth can survive in a world where power shapes perception as much as reality. History reveals a conflict entangled in the webs of global interests. The Israel-Palestine struggle is not merely a local feud, but a geopolitical chessboard where superpowers move their pieces. The United States, with its $3.8 billion annual military aid to Israel, as reported by the Congressional Research Service, in 2024 bolsters one side, framing Israel as a bulwark against regional threats. Meanwhile, nations like Iran support Palestinian factions, channeling funds to groups like Hamas, as noted in a 2023 UN Security Council report. The Cold War saw the Soviet Union and the U.S. proxy warring through Arab-Israeli conflicts, each side arming its allies to tilt the balance. This global dance of alliances, rooted in oil, security, and ideology, muddies the waters, turning truth into a pawn of strategic gain. Philosopher Michel Foucault warned that truth is a product of power. Here, power's fingerprints smudge every narrative. Media, the supposed arbiter of truth, often becomes its undertaker. Both sides accuse the other of propaganda. Israeli media highlights rocket attacks from Gaza, while Palestinian outlets spotlight IDF operations in the West Bank. A 2024 study by the Pew Research Center found that 68% of Western media coverage frames Israel as a victim of terror, while 54% of Middle Eastern sources depict Palestinians as oppressed. Social media amplifies this divide. X posts from 2025 show viral hashtags like She Free Palestine and Israel under fire, each weaving selective truths. Algorithms designed to maximize engagement prioritize outrage over nuance, fragmenting reality into echo chambers. Edward Said, in his work covering Islam, argued that media distorts the other to serve dominant narratives. In this conflict, truth is not just reported, it's curated, weaponized, and sold. The core revelation is stark. Truth in the Israel-Palestine conflict is not a singular beacon, but a kaleidoscope, refracting through lenses of bias, power, and pain. Each side's narrative, Israel's security imperatives, Palestine's quest for self-determination, holds fragments of truth, yet neither encompasses the whole. Real-world examples underscore this. The 2023 Gaza-Israel clashes, with over 1,200 deaths per OCHA data, were framed by Western outlets as a response to Hamas aggression, while Arab media emphasized Israel's blockade as the root cause. Both are factual, yet neither tells the full story. Truth, then, is not absent, but splintered, buried under layers of selective storytelling. Now, the paradigm-shifting twist. What if truth's elusiveness is not a flaw, but the conflict's deepest mystery? The philosopher Hannah Arendt spoke of truth as a shared reality forged through dialogue. Yet in this conflict, dialogue drowns in dogma. Superpowers and media do not merely obscure truth, they redefine it, making it a casualty of war not through destruction, but through fragmentation. The question becomes, is truth unknowable? Or is our refusal to see the other's perspective the true casualty? The 2024 Abraham Accords, expanding Arab-Israeli normalization, hint at a truth both sides evade. Coexistence requires acknowledging mutual pain, not claiming narrative supremacy. We end with a haunting reflection. If truth is a casualty, can peace survive its loss? The Israel-Palestine conflict demands not a singular truth, but a courageous reckoning with multiple truths, each side's fears, histories, and hopes. Only by weaving these fragments into a shared narrative can we resurrect truth from the ashes of war. Until then, we are left to wonder. In a world that profits from division, is truth's death the price of our silence?
How do we reconcile the idea of self-defense with overwhelming asymmetry in power, when one side possesses advanced military infrastructure and the other is fighting for existential visibility?
The question cuts like a blade through the heart of the Israel-Palestine conflict, exposing a paradox that haunts the very notion of self-defense. How can we weigh the moral legitimacy of survival when power is so starkly imbalanced? One side wields cutting-edge military might, backed by global superpowers, while the other fights with stones, rockets, and the raw cry for recognition. To reconcile this asymmetry is to navigate a moral quagmire where self-defense, a universal instinct, becomes a mirror reflecting both justice and devastation. Let us plunge into this abyss, seeking not to justify but to illuminate the shadows cast by power and survival. Begin with the asymmetry itself. Israel's military, among the world's most advanced, boasts Iron Dome defenses, F-35 jets, and a nuclear arsenal, as noted in a 2024 SIPRI report. Backed by $3.8 billion in annual U.S. aid, its infrastructure is a fortress of security, forged from a history of existential threats, wars in 1948, 1967, and 1973, and ongoing rocket barrages from Gaza. For Israelis, self-defense is not abstract. It's the calculus of survival against neighbors who, in some cases, deny their right to exist. Hamas's 2023 attacks, killing over 1,200 civilians, per Israeli government data, fuel this narrative of necessity. Yet, for Palestinians, self-defense is equally existential, but their tools are disparate: homemade rockets, protests, and global advocacy. Living under occupation, with 5.9 million refugees, UNRWA 2024, and Gaza's 17-year blockade, their fight is for visibility, for a voice against erasure. Philosopher Frantz Fanon argued that the oppressed resist by any means necessary. For Palestinians, every stone thrown is a claim to existence. The core revelation is that self-defense in this conflict is a fractured concept, warped by the imbalance of power. Israel's overwhelming force, evidenced by over 41,000 Palestinian deaths in Gaza since 2023, per OCHA, is framed as proportionate by its leaders, a response to terror. Yet, to Palestinians, this asymmetry transforms self-defense into oppression, where airstrikes and checkpoints dwarf their capacity to resist. The philosopher Judith Butler questions whether self-defense can be universal when one side's survival negates the other's. The 2021 Sheikh Jarrah evictions, sparking global protests, highlight this. Israel's legal defense of property rights clashed with Palestinian claims to ancestral homes, revealing how power shapes the very definition of defense. This leads to the paradigm-shifting twist. What if self-defense in its asymmetry is not a moral absolute but a trap? Both sides claim the right to protect themselves, yet the imbalance ensures neither feels secure. Israel's military dominance breeds fear of annihilation, as each neutralized threat spawns new ones. Palestinians, outgunned, turn to asymmetric tactics, rockets, tunnels, or media campaigns, yet gain little ground against a fortified foe. The 2024 escalation, with Israel's AI-driven Lavender system targeting Gaza, per Policing 1972 magazine, shows how technology widens this gap, reducing human lives to data points. Meanwhile, Palestinian resistance, often labeled terrorism, struggles to shift global perceptions. The twist lies in this paradox. The more each side defends itself, the deeper the cycle of insecurity grows. Martin Luther King Jr.'s insight that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere suggests that true self-defense requires mutual security, not domination. So, we stand at a precipice. Can self-defense exist without reciprocity? The asymmetry in power, military, economic, diplomatic, distorts the moral calculus, making one side's defense another's destruction. Peace demands a radical reimagining, not a zero-sum game where one survives at the other's expense, but a shared framework where both are seen. The Oslo Accords' faltering steps toward coexistence, though stalled, whisper of this possibility. Until both sides recognize the other's right to self-defense as inseparable from their own, the question lingers. Is self-defense a shield for survival, or a sword that carves deeper wounds in the soul of humanity?
If peace requires mutual recognition, how can two peoples coexist when each sees the very identity of the other as a threat to their own survival?
The question pierces the soul of the Israel-Palestine conflict, laying bare a paradox as old as the blood-soaked hills of this contested land. How can peace take root when each people perceives the other's very existence as a mortal threat to their own? Mutual recognition, the supposed cornerstone of coexistence, seems an impossible bridge when identities are forged in the crucible of fear, loss, and competing claims to survival. To grapple with this is to confront the limits of human imagination, where the heart's longing for peace clashes with the mind's dread of annihilation. Let us embark on this final odyssey, not to resolve the unresolvable, but to seek a flicker of hope amidst the shadows of mutual dread. History paints a stark picture. For Jews, the State of Israel is a sanctuary born from centuries of exile, pogroms, and the Holocaust's unspeakable horror. The 1948 Declaration of Statehood was not just political, but existential, a vow that never again would they face annihilation. Yet, for Palestinians, this same moment, the Nakba, marked their dispossession with 750,000 displaced per day. UNRWA 2024, and a national identity fractured. Their struggle for statehood is a fight for visibility, a refusal to vanish into history's margins. Each side's identity is a fortress. Israel's rooted in a Jewish homeland as a bulwark against extinction. Palestine's in resistance to occupation and erasure. The philosopher Emmanuel Levinas speaks of the face of the other as a call to ethical responsibility, but here, each sees in the other's face a threat to their very being. The 2023 Hamas attacks, killing 200 Israelis, and Israel's response with over 41,000 Palestinian deaths, per OCHA, underscore this cycle. Each act of survival deepens the other's fear. The core revelation is that identity in this conflict is not merely a story of self, but a weapon of exclusion. Both peoples cling to narratives that define their existence against the others. Israel's Zionist ethos, claiming the land as a divine and historical right, implicitly negates Palestinian indigeneity. Palestine's narrative of return and liberation casts Israel as an illegitimate occupier. Real-world examples abound. Israel's 2024 expansion of West Bank settlements, displacing 1,500 Palestinians, per B'Tselem, is seen as securing Jewish identity, while Palestinian calls for the right of return threaten Israel's demographic core. Philosopher Edward Said noted that identity is a construct, not a destiny, yet here it binds both sides in a zero-sum struggle where one's survival seems to demand the other's diminishment. Now, the paradigm-shifting twist. What if the threat each perceives in the other is not the identity itself, but the refusal to see its shared humanity? The fear that Israel's existence negates Palestine, or that Palestine's liberation erases Israel, stems from a failure to imagine coexistence beyond victory. The 1993 Oslo Accords, though faltering, glimpsed this possibility, a two-state framework where mutual recognition was not surrender but a step toward shared survival. Yet, the 2025 X posts on Irj Peace Now reveal a persistent truth. Both sides' youth, radicalized by decades of trauma, see compromise as betrayal. The twist lies in this mystery. The true threat is not the other's identity but the inability to envision a future where both identities coexist. Martin Buber's I and Thou urges dialogue over domination, yet dialogue falters when fear speaks louder than hope. We end with a question that haunts like a whisper in the desert. Can peace emerge when identity is a battlefield? Mutual recognition requires a leap of faith, to see the other not as a threat but as a mirror of one's own longing for life. The Abraham Accords, normalizing ties with Arab states, hint at a broader regional shift, yet exclude Palestinians, leaving the core wound unhealed. Peace demands both peoples redefine their identities, not as negations of the other, but as threads in a shared tapestry. Until then, we are left to ponder. Can humanity transcend its fear of the other, or will the quest for survival forever drown the hope of coexistence?